Hey 3DMJers, this is Alberto Nunez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. This is Q&A session number 14, and it's our 140th episode. We can't tell you how much it means to have all of you guys listening to us and leaving us such great reviews. Seriously, it's an honor, and it keeps us motivated to keep making podcasts, articles, videos, and courses for years to come. And one of our favorite ways that we like to show our thanks to all of you guys for supporting us is by answering your questions. So we will be doing just that today with Brad, Jeff, and myself addressing 7 of them from a couple different sources. So how can you ask us questions? As some of you guys might be thinking. The first place we take questions from is our case study Q&A page on our website, and you'll often hear Brad call it the CSQA for short. You can access that page at any time by visiting 3dmusclejourney.com/Q&A. The second place we pulled questions from was our Instagram messages, our DMs. We did a call for questions a while back in our stories and saved an extra couple for this episode. If you don't already follow us there, we are at Team 3DMJ on Instagram, and it's the best place to stay up to date when we have announcements or sales of any sort. Topics for this show will include muscle maturity and muscle shaping, manipulating cardio or lifting volume during a deload, single set duration while training, dealing with constipation when dieting. Don't laugh, we've all had that one happen. Guidelines for reducing volume as intensity increases, deloading body parts independently versus full body deloads. And the last question was, where do we see the internet culture when it relates to fitness? Or where do we see that going over the next decade? That one was an interesting one. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel, at youtube.com/team3dmj, and leave it under podcast number 140. I'm running out of breath. I'm running out of voice. Let's get into it. Here it is, Q&A session number 14 with Jeff Alberts, Brad Loomis, and yours truly, Alberto Nunez.
Three MJers, welcome. Q&A number 14. I'm joined by Alberto Nunez and Jeff Alberts. I hope you're looking good, Albert. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. I've been eating really good now that we're post Worlds. So we're on to the recovery diet, and we're recovering really well. So after we're done with this, I'm going to go recover some more and eat some more.
And Mr. Nunez, how are you, sir?
I'm well, man. We got a pummel today with snow, so yeah, it's starting to get cold out here in Colorado. But hey, luckily for me, I have a nice layer of insulation these days, so that definitely helps.
Potential energy. Boy, you beat me this year, Alberto. We don't have any snow yet.
Wow, we've had it since before Halloween, so yeah, man, it's gonna be a nasty one, which I dislike it because it means like more warming up in the weight room. That's the one thing about winter workouts. It's like it just takes forever to get going. Every time we go somewhere warm, it's like, yeah, you're all sweaty and nasty, but the whole time you're like, we're like in Hong Kong. Oh, it's the goodness, man. You feel ready to go all the time. How you doing, Bree? How you doing?
I'm doing good, you guys. I'm doing good. And I'm doing really good because we've got 7 good questions that Andrea was nice enough to screen for us. To talk about for the next hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, however many.
I hope it involves 7 questions about food. What kind of pizza I eat, what kind of tacos I eat. No, I'm kidding.
Well, ironically, Jeffrey, I think there is a couple of questions here that you can talk about food. So,
nice.
Welcome to chime in with that. So, gents, without further ado, are you ready? Should we get rolling on this?
Hey, let's do it. Let's make up some answers.
You need any more warm-up sets, Berto?
No. This is as warm as I need to be for this. I'm ready, man. I'm so caffeinated, dude. I am.
All right. Well, we're gonna have you lead off with this one. So, question number one, Penny. Little context. She's a 51-year-old female. I've done 3 massing phases under guidance of a reputable coach with all of the appropriate maintenance and cutting phases. Knowing that there is a margin of error with DEXA scan, I had several performed with the latest being at the end of a massing/maintenance phase prior to a cut and comparing to another DEXA scan taken during maintenance phase following cut. All of my LBM has stayed right within 1 pound of the DEXA performed first. So her question is it possible to shape the muscles without gaining actual lean tissue?
Shape the muscles. Okay, I thought originally this question was gonna go in the realm of
So
I'm
it
not
sounds
happy with
like
my
she's
DEXA.
kind of like maybe wondering like, okay, I didn't really gain too much muscle mass here, so can I change at least the shape of the muscle and make me look like I have some gains? That's what I'm
Yeah.
assuming. Like maybe that question's come from like maybe just a little bit of insecurity that like she's not making any gains at all.
Yeah, I would guess that. Yeah, I would guess that. And I've got a fair amount to say about this, but Burrow, you're on a roll. Let's get you going while you're moving here.
Mine's just very simple. I don't like the DEXA or getting any of that stuff done. Like sometimes people do. I'm like, yeah, sure, it's fun, it's an experience. Like when I got my last DEXA done, it was in 2014. Haven't been back since. It was fun. It was exciting. I think just seeing my skeleton was probably I had never seen my whole skeleton. That was pretty. It's like holy crap, I have one of those, right? But I feel that the best thing you can do is learn to take consistent pictures, have pictures at certain landmark body weights, right? So, for example, like a good old bro, it's like, this is your summer lean, this is your winter bulk. Compare them, and that's honestly, that's all you need. Like, if you look better, who cares, right? I think, honestly, like, messing with these things, just, I see this a lot, basically. But like pictures, like before and after pictures from 3 years ago, like at this body weight, and compare that to, I think that's what people should be focusing on. So yeah, DEXA's, hey, if you have a hookup, someone's going to do it for you. And just, yeah, it's a fun little adventure, but I'd much rather do it the good old fashioned way.
Jeff, you got anything to
I agree 100% with what he's saying because I'm not really a numbers guy. So to me, the visuals always speak volumes. I can even take myself this year as an example. I just took 7 photos from 7 shows, and I can say, okay, shows number 2 through 4 were my best look, even though the stage weight was roughly the same in every single show. But 2 through 4 just had a more balanced overall look. Like the muscle looked fuller, it looked hard, symmetrical, whereas some of the other shows it looked a little flat in certain areas. So the visuals, I think, are really a true representation of how successful you are in like gaining. And it sounds like if you're, let's say, gaining only a pound of muscle or a little less than, I mean, the error on those things, I mean, it's, how do you know like if you're actually making progress or not? But again, like Berto's saying, if you're taking photos periodically at the same weight, you're going to see, okay, how did I look at this weight right now? How do I look at that weight 6 months from now, a year from now? So when I usually put my athletes through gaining phases, it's, more conservative gaining. So let's say we're gaining, maybe 5, 6, 7 pounds over a 4-month stretch. Then let's say we do a little bit of a mini cut. Well, the weight they started at and the weight they end at is exactly the same, but the hope is that we look a little bit better down the road. So I do the same thing. I could care less about what numbers are telling me. It's more about, okay, how are we looking? How are we feeling too? That's another thing. So that's kind of my take on it.
how
you're performing, where your energy level's at. You could be, let's say, here's one too. Let's say you look better with less muscle. Let's say you gain a pound of muscle, but let's say for some odd reason your energy levels aren't that great, you're more in pain or whatever, just yada yada yada. I'd rather like look 5% less but feel 50% better. But of course that's not the goal. But I mean, we have to look at other things besides just what a number is telling us, in my opinion anyways.
Yeah, and I can go on with this for a while, you guys, so cut me off, give me the whatever, the hook.
No, go ahead, because that way I could dream about my pizza a little bit more.
But having been the technologist that's done DEXA scans before, in fact, Berto, that very same Hologic DEXA scanner that you did your DEXA scan with, I want to share with you guys a little bit of the story. Now, obviously, with DEXA scans, the whole reason that those came to be in existence was for bone mineral density, right? And testing bone mineral density over time in the prevention of osteopenia and osteoporosis and things like that. And I'll never forget the first time that I did a DEXA scan, I messed it up. I did the DEXA scan, had the little thing go over the person and everything, and I thought that I lost the data. So I had to go get the patient. It's kind of embarrassing, bring them back in, redo their scan, got the data, etc., let them go. Lo and behold, no, I didn't lose the data that was in the first scan. I had both of them, basically. And even as careful as I was, making sure that I positioned the patient in the very same position on the table, the very head so far from the top of the table, feet, so far from the bottom of the table, left to right and everything, there was still a 10-gram difference in the amount of bone that the person had. Because people don't know this, there's about 8 pounds in bones, which is about what? Yeah. About 3 kilos, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a 10-gram difference. And that was the same machine done by the same technologist trying to make all of the variables all the same. So you can imagine if you're having different DEXA scans done through different technologists with different machines over time, there's going to be some variation, from DEXA scan, from scan to scan to scan to scan. So you can only put so much faith into those numbers. But I do feel that they're a little bit more privy of what's going on in your beginner type, maybe even novice type training. I think then you're actually going to see some significant differences, as long as they're not done like every week, obviously. They need to be done probably biannually at the most frequent, right? But then it's going to be masked the further you are in that continuum of beginner all the way up to advanced, right? But speaking of the shape of the muscle, another story, if you guys don't mind. I remember I want to say it was our 2011 prep when we were all getting ready for the Pro International. And I was still in my days of measuring body parts, right? And I was so excited. And Jeff, I don't know if you remember this, but you said, Brad, look at your biceps. Your biceps have biceps. They have little hats on top of them, And sure enough, I had a new split that I had never, ever seen before. I had a new split right up in the peak of the bicep. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to measure. I got to measure my arms and see how much bigger they are now. And I mean, wouldn't you know it? I'm tempted not to say the number, but when I diet down, my arms are like 15 and like 3/4. And this particular time I measured them, and guess what? 15 and 3/4. They were the exact same size as they had been on every prep all the way back to, basically 2004, 2003. But it had a new split in it. And so when we talk about old man muscle and we talk about that muscle maturity, that's where I think the gains are being made. Not necessarily in size, but there's new splits, there's new marbling, there's new granite look, there's new hardness, whatever you want to call it. It's probably the same size, but there's that different look to it. Maybe it's shape, maybe it's not shape, whatever you want to call it. But I do kind of believe that does happen. Guys, what do you think about that?
I tend to agree. Like I can see my physique like, 15, 20 years ago versus now, and body weight on stage hasn't really changed a significant amount, but obviously my physique now looks leaner, harder, grainier. Hard to describe what's going on exactly, but obviously when you get leaner, you're going to see more detail. And when you see more detail, like you take your shirt off, like, okay, yeah, you look bigger. Like, wow, you can see all that detail. So the illusion is you look bigger. Maybe in clothes, you might appear a little smaller because you lost more body fat. So it makes you appear smaller in clothes. So again, it comes down to those illusions, right? That Berto and I were talking about earlier, why it's important to take photos versus relying on what a machine is telling you what your gains are. So I guess, yeah, call it old school or whatever, but I just think that's a better, it's more of an accurate way of assessing it. Because even if, let's say, like body fat percentage, for example, everybody hears, oh man, you're 6-7% body fat. Like they assume that's better than 10% body fat, but you can be 6% and still not be happy with how you're looking. So is it the number that's you're looking for to give you that clarification of how successful are you, or is it the actual visual? So that's kind of, for me personally, like I rely more so on the visuals than the numbers.
I agree. There's like only so much muscle a specific bone frame can carry, right? And I guess the best way I've outside of leanness, the best way I've described muscle growth past a certain point to people is, you ever seen those old skylines of cities? It's like, this is like New York City in 1900. This is the 1930s, 60s. And it's kind of like, it's the same space for the most part, but there's just so much more shit going on, you know? Like within what's there, it's like you're like, oh, wow. It's like, yeah. So it's kind of the same thing on physiques. Like, it's like your arms might not necessarily change in circumference, like when you're in your top shape, whether that's summer lean or contest shape, you know? But yeah, it definitely changes in appearance, which again kind of goes back to where we started with this. It's like, that's honestly, like, we're all going for a look at the end, right? Otherwise, like, I feel like my arms have improved this off season, but like in terms of size, I measured them today actually, and I was like, oh, okay, well, same old song.
What are they?
I'm not telling nobody. You never ask a man the size of his arms, Jeff.
Hence why I was reluctant to give out my my numbers.
That's because they're not bigger than my off-season arms. That's why he's not saying it.
They're 16 and a half.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. I might have to edit that. I'll see how I feel about putting that out there.
Yeah, but that's I'll give you credit because your frame and and you have shorter arms. So yeah, that's a pretty big arm. Like, so that's a good example, right? Like I have longer arms than you. So my 18-inch off-season arm is probably the equivalent of your 16 and a half inch, because our bone lengths. So visually, yours probably looks just as big, if not bigger than mine, even though the circumference is smaller.
Yeah. So there's just so many things that go into an appearance, right? And again, that's what we're all after at the end. So, man, those gadgets are cool, but like whether it's those scales that were popular for a while that take your body fat, it's like they're just not as useful as people would like as of right now.
All right, guys, you feel pretty comfortable with how we've answered that one?
Yeah, I think we did a good job.
Okay. Question number 2. This comes from Instagram at Contest Prep Chef. He's a 40-year-old male. I have been prepping and dieting for roughly 8 or 9 months leading into my first bodybuilding competition doing classic physique. I have a moderately stressful lifestyle with pulses of high stress occasionally due to work and life's other stressors. I often try to auto-regulate training based on how stressful my life is by reducing the amount of cardio. So, the question, does reducing cardio create enough of an overall training deload to accommodate the increased stress? Or do I need to reduce my lifting volume as well?
Wow. I mean, I feel him, man. It's like 8 or 9 months of prep. I feel that. Especially coming off of a prep. And you said he's a chef, Brad?
That's his Instagram name, is Contest.
He might be a chef, so I might have to contact him so he can maybe make me something really good to eat.
He's a chef, no.
But I think there's, like, as far as stress and fatigue and all that, like, I think maybe cardio is enough, like toning that down is enough to kind of bring overall stress down and make things good. But it's hard to say exactly what needs to be done without probably knowing more context for his particular situation. But I mean, in general, like if you think about prep, it's like, to me, it's about managing supply and demand. So if you think about what are demands, it's okay, your training is a demand, cardio is a demand, the prep itself is like being in a deficit. That's an overall demand there. Plus you factor in work and family, kids, spouse or whatever, like everything is a stressor. And the supply, if you think about it, it's like your food level and, sleep and that type of thing. So it's about balancing it out. And it's like, okay, what's more appropriate at a specific time or context that you're under? So there's, for example, for me, it's like there's moments where I've had to tone cardio down. There's moments where I've had to tone training down, whether it's reducing volume or just adding in rest days. You're the deload king, Brad. I mean, you could probably go on for days about how to bring overall fatigue levels down. Like it's almost endless as far as what you can do. You can even, temporarily, let's actually keep cardio in or keep training the way it is and just increase food levels for a little while. That might be enough to bring fatigue down so you can start progressing again. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly what would be the right answer here without knowing specific context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in specific context that's important would be like, for example, what is the source of cardio? Like, for example, Jeff, I would imagine that you felt a reduction in fatigue going from the walks to riding the bike. There was a little less impact. There was a little less stress on your joints. Just probably that change in cardio, you felt a little bit of a reduction in stress, and fatigue. So yeah, I mean, I think that with that kind of context, yes, I think that especially, and it's not so much for bodybuilders, but like, let's say, for example, powerlifters that are trying to make a weight class, for example, or so many of our dual athletes that are bodybuilders and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, wrestlers, practitioners, whatever you want to call them, or, so many people are bodybuilders in their cops, or they're bodybuilders in their, armed forces or something like that. You just changing cardio, sometimes just shortening cardio. Like if, for example, you've got to, as part of your requirements, do certain, pack tests and runs and things like that. Sometimes just taking that overall amount of cardio that you're doing and dropping the duration down by 50% is enough of a deload to where it could impact your weight training. Now, there again, there's another variable. What is the volume of your weight training? What phase of periodization are you in? Are you in a volume phase? Are you in a strength phase? Because I would imagine that probably if you're doing so much volume and on top of it you're doing a lot of cardio, you're going to feel that in the hypertrophy type phase of your training. However, if you've been doing that for a long enough time, it's not going to be enough. It's going to be like trying to kill an elephant or a rhino with a BB gun. It's not going to be enough of an impact.
Yeah, it sounds like this individual too, like 8 or 9 months of prep. Like they're, figuring, okay, that long in prep, they're pretty darn lean and calories are probably on the lower side. So imagining that, like overall fatigue levels are probably pretty escalated. So, maybe just lowering down cardio may not be enough. Maybe this person needs, to lower intensity down in the gym, again, without knowing what their intensity level is. Do they train to failure, often? Do they not? Do they keep 2 to 3 in the tank a lot? So it's hard to gauge where they're at. But I mean, if you're training with a lot of intensity, then yeah, maybe backing off a little bit. Might not even need to lower volume down. You just need to lower maybe intensity down a little bit. If you are doing high volume, high intensity, it's like, okay, maybe you need to do both. Maybe you need to drop a set off and maybe drop your overall intensity down temporarily to bring that fatigue level down. So again, it's hard to just perfectly pinpoint what to do. But I think in general, I mean, yeah, if you're not recovering too well and you're feeling sluggish and fatigued a lot all the time, then you can try reducing cardio down first to see if you get what you're looking for. But if that's still not the case, then you might have to lower down some training volume to get a better response and recovery. Because if you think about it too, let's say your recovery improves, even though you drop the volume down. So you're thinking, oh man, I'm going backwards because the volume goes down. But if your recovery improves, then the new amount of volume you're doing, you're probably going to perform better. So you may perform better. And in a sense, if you get your performance up, that's an increase in volume. So it's going to probably balance out anyways, but you're recovering better. You have less likely, I should say your risk for injury is less likely. You're going to have less aches and pains, that type of thing. So, I would just basically kind of just see, start slow, maybe go with the cardio, then go from there if you're not getting the effect you're looking for.
Alberto looks like he's chomping at the bit over there, ready to just
jump. I'm going to think about pizza now again. Go ahead.
There's just too many things, man. And you guys covered quite a bit. Well, life, you can only do so much about that, right? And I think cardio really, if you're using cardio the way it's intended to be, which is for expenditure when you're prepping, then it shouldn't be the brunt of your stress. It's probably going to come via the issue here is probably going to come via the lifting. So I guess what I will say is that, and you guys know this, is like, given the population we work with, we tend to have people that they're more prone to doing too much, right? And the way the dosage, the relationship between volume and response goes, right? It's like for a while it kind of does this, and then it's that upside down U, and then it trails back down, right? And most people, it's like they could be doing this amount of volume to progress, but they're actually like right here, and they're maybe doing 30-40% more than they need to be quite honest. And I feel like contest prep, your body just becomes a lot more transparent, so that like U becomes more like a V. It's way more sharp. Mm-hmm. And usually, because I'm guilty of this. Like in my off season, like this is what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, this is about right. But then come contest prep time, especially in those deeper phases, your body's just a lot more transparent. And like, for example, today I did 4 sets of extra rows on this machine just because I had never tried it and I was curious. So I went for it, and I'm eating enough where, to be quite honest, it was, I could have that sort of playtime and it'd be fine. But come contest prep time, it's like, oh, no. If I do that, I know my good mornings on Friday are going to suffer, so I will not do it. So your system's just way more transparent. So what I'm saying is that this person in general might just be doing too much. And now that he's been dieting for a while, it's a little bit more obvious now. So I would probably look at the many things that could be going wrong in your training. And that's volume, that can be intensity, that can even be exercise selection, right? So for example, if you put together like me and you have this long torso and these short arms, and the deadlift is probably going to tap you out a little bit more than some other hip hinge variation that you could be using. So there's a bunch of things to look at, but it's probably going to come via the training side of things, because that's where we see people perhaps going a little bit too hard. And unless this person's running like intervals like 5 times a week, I just don't see cardio being the thing to pick on. So it's amazing how much more people typically do relative to what they actually need. And I don't know, come contest prep time, it's kind of like a wash up period. It's like by the time I'm done with it, I'm like, okay, so there we go. Yes, like I realistically only need 17 sets of back a week and not those 28 that I was doing in the off season. So it's a time to declutter. So this might be his chance to declutter a little bit.
All right, good. You guys satisfied with that one?
I think so. I hope. OP is 8 to 9 months of prepping though. Like you just don't feel great.
Like I say,
I'll say that.
It's a deep into prep. Yeah, like I said, overall, like supply and demand, I can guarantee demand is really high. There's just not enough supply. Like Alberto was saying, like off season, you can get away with it. Like there's far more supply. So obviously he's not going to be eating more food because if he's still trying to get lean or whatever. So it's like, okay, might have to bring that demand down, bring the training down temporarily. Doesn't mean he's going to lose muscle mass. I mean, you'd have to literally stop training altogether 3 or 4 weeks to see your muscle fade away. So I think if he just reduces a little bit, it'll probably be fine.
Really quick favor, guys. If you enjoy these shows and have been a listener for quite some time, we would really, really, really appreciate it if you could take the time to give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your preferred podcast app may be. Having lots of ratings and audience feedback makes our show become more visible across multiple platforms, and it supports our mission of helping as many people as we can to be the best athletes, coaches, and lifting enthusiasts that they could possibly be. So if you're not driving and wouldn't be dangerous, pause this thing right now and give us an honest review over on your podcast app, and we would love you even more than we already do. Thanks for taking the time, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Alrighty. So thank you, Contest Prep Chef. Let's move to on the gram, Noah the Great. I think is how you pronounce that. Noah's a male, and assuming I have every other variable under control when doing an exercise at a specific volume, is there any hypertrophy difference in how long the set takes? For example, if I'm doing a set of 10 on squats with a given weight, will there be any difference in hypertrophy response if I do all 10 reps in 15 seconds and get a pump, quote unquote, versus taking 45 seconds for the set, resting at the top for a few seconds in between reps, and not really getting as big a pump? You guys want me to repeat that?
No, I'm reading it. Did you get it, Jeff?
To know if there's a difference between doing a longer set versus a shorter set when it relates to hypertrophy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're taking longer, like are you meaning more rest time or like purposely like rest, or
down?
You said the rest or the actual speed of the movement?
I think he's talking about tempo.
Tempo more than...
Also with the lift, but then also the clustering a little bit. So like kind of in between sets, getting himself together.
I mean, you don't purposely want to slow down your concentrics.
No.
When specifically, Jeff, he's saying he's taking 45 seconds of rest versus taking 45 seconds for the set, resting at the top for a few seconds between reps.
Well, I think tempo, he just needs to see the muscle and strength pyramids and see that that's probably not something you want to test.
For the top, yeah.
Right, yeah. The only time I really think tempo matters is maybe if you're doing that super intensive work, right? Where, the goal is to just kind of keep pumping out reps in these obnoxious rep ranges. If that's what you're doing, I think you want more continuous work, obviously, right? But I think, so messing with your tempo is probably, it's not advisable. I don't think it's that important. And I guess the other thing is, I think the 15 seconds to 45 seconds, I can't see how 10 reps on the same exercise can be that different. You're really slowing stuff down if it ends up being 45 seconds. I will say this, because I'm kind of guilty of this. Like, I can recover very well in between reps. Mm-hmm. So if I'm not careful, I can cluster a lot of my work. And what that does is it lets me sneak out a little bit more out of every set, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Mm. Like, I can exceed what, like maybe I should have done 3 sets of 8 on this movement, but because I was clustering, I ended up, sneaking 11 reps, and obviously that's going to impact my recovery a little bit differently, right? I'd say I think the biggest difference, especially I'd say for people like me and women, is sometimes when you cluster, you can take it to the point where you're doing more work than what you can realistically do with that load in a straight set. But then also if you go too fast, like I guess you're probably not minding your eccentrics either, and that's important too, because there's volume and good stuff happening on that end too. So I guess how we tell most people is like the load should probably dictate how long the set lasts, both in regards to I guess what rep range is it in, right? A 3 rep set's going to last way less than a 12 rep set, and so on and so on. But no, messing with tempo,
I think it could be exercise dependent too, like depending on what movement we're talking. Like I know for me a squat, I'm not gonna try to do 10 reps in 15 seconds on a squat. That's my form's gonna go to shit. I mean, it's gonna look ugly, and last thing I want to do on a squat is get hurt. So maybe yeah, okay, I might slow some things down, like maybe take a couple breaths extra in between my reps on squats. Make sure my form is where it needs to be. Make sure my bracing is where it needs to be. But if I'm doing a set of curls, I'm not gonna sit there and breathe between every rep, like 5 deep breaths in between reps on curls. I mean, practically it just makes no sense. So I think often a lot of these questions are coming from more like a science perspective, like, okay, what's more optimal? But to me, I tend to look at, because I've been training for so long, I'm like, okay, what's more practical? Like what's gonna be effective for me to get good form? What's gonna keep me the safest? And what style of training I enjoy too. Like I think all that for me, it's like I want to have like obviously fun when I'm training, but keep safe at the same time. So that's kind of things I think are, for me anyways, more important in how I kind of look at my training.
Yeah, and this might sound bad, and if it does, I apologize. But sometimes I feel like questions like this kind of come from people that are looking for quote unquote hacks. They're trying to make shortcuts. It's like, how can I get the least amount of effort for the most result, right? And this will kind of come to one of our other questions, later on. But that's kind of what I feel like the whole evidence-based.
Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of times too, like a lot of people will hear certain things from different people, like, hey, this is more optimal. And then they try to run with this, or they think that's going to be like the solution. It's going to give them that 20% edge or 10% edge. But again, it's like, for me, when I look at my perspective of like, okay, I've been doing this for 33 years, is more about, okay, what's going to be effective for me personally and what's safe and what do I do enjoy. That overrides trying to get that 1%. Hey, I'm gonna try to crank out 10 reps in 15 seconds on squats because so-and-so said it might be more optimal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not going to say that tempo training doesn't have its place, because I do think it does. I just don't know how much of a crossover there is to hypertrophy, which is kind of this person's particular question: is does it actually affect hypertrophy? And it seems like in mass we do have some evidence that kind of states something about no, it doesn't, or yes, it does, or it could be bad, or it could be whatever. But what I do know is that we do use tempo training a lot to help people with like control of the eccentric, making sure that they're not rushing on their eccentric portion and keeping their body under the bar and performing better in the lift, right? And that's where I think a lot of times people will hear something where the intent is for this particular thing, and then of course they think, oh, well, naturally, it's better if I make it take longer and there's more volume if the set takes longer, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, yeah, you got to take that to a point. You got to take it with a grain of salt. Berto, did you want to add anything to that?
No. I think when you go too far in any extreme with the tempo for when it comes to muscle growth is like, you have the person that's actively trying to make the set last longer, and usually that's going to cost them load, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which also affects volume, yeah.
Yeah. And then you have people that just run through their sets, and obviously we've seen that in practice. It doesn't always look good, right? So it's just a hair not worth splitting. You're right, Brad. I think when we do use tempo, it's probably, say, on the bench press, we want to get the person to be more consistent when it comes to hitting that same spot every time, right? Or like positioning on I guess any of the big major power lifts, right? But no, when it comes to muscle growth, I just not a hair worth splitting, I believe. Yeah, and I don't think people are trying to necessarily like make things easier. I just feel like they feel there might be some novel growth or stimulus if they do it that way. I think that's more so what they're after. But no, just lift the weights, I say.
Yeah, and guys, I'm tempted to just kind of use that as a segue and kind of jump to, kind of one of my favorite questions that Andrea gave us here. And if you guys are cool with it, I'm going to jump to question number 7. Newton, a 20-year-old male from our CSQA form. This question is less so about training specifics, but I'm interested to hear the coach's point of view on the current state of the information sphere, quote unquote, of fitness. Do you guys and gal think that the information overload from the evidence-based circles have caused individuals to be overwhelmed and a bit too neurotic about fine details? My opinion is that shooting for perfection has taken away from the beauty of training. The in-the-moment, quote-unquote, appreciation for the sport is lost sometimes, and we're too focused on numbers. Granted, it has allowed for people to focus on the pertinent variables, but at what cost? Is it possible that in the near future we will see more and more people burn out early from early overcommitment to the sport? I feel like a victim of this sometimes, as social media can become a platform for comparison and creates a sense of yearning rather than contentment and appreciation for whatever progress may come. And if I can kind of jump in here, this is kind of what I was alluding to, is that sometimes all the evidence that we have out there, it tends to take away from, get to the gym, lift the weights, go home and eat, go to sleep, rinse and repeat. And then continue doing that. Like one of my favorite coaches at the gym I train at says, okay, that was perfect. Now I want you to do that 100,000 times.
Practice makes perfect, right, Brad?
Yeah. So what do you guys think about Newton's question there?
It's a loaded one, man.
It is. I mean, I'll just say one thing. I'll let Berto kind of go off of it. But basically, I mean, when I head into 2020, I'm rolling into my 34th year of training. So I can tell you, 34 years, I can't recall at any point where I've been perfect in my training, where everything was just perfect. Maybe momentarily, like things are really flowing, but whether I'm trying to focus on my tempo, like what's more optimal in my tempo, or what volume is best, or what training approach is best, like it's all context based. And it's like the reason I'm still training is because I gravitate towards what I enjoy. Now, granted, not all the time where I'm like I'm doing things that I'm enjoying that it's the most optimal, but it keeps me motivated and it keeps me training. So if I'm focusing too much on these little details, and let's say a year goes by and I'm like just frustrated, I can't figure out what exactly should I be doing, am I making enough progress, not making enough progress, I'm in a stressed state for a whole year and I'm not enjoying myself. My motivation might go down. I might say, fuck it, I'm done training. This is silly. I think I'll go race cars instead. Right? Brad would probably like that. But anyways, yeah. So my point being is that I tend to gravitate towards what's practical, what's safe, and what do I enjoy. Like that's my answer to a lot of things, but that's the reason why I'm still doing it. And I just came off of a long ass prep, and you would think like, okay, could you imagine if I was focused on every single detail for the last year of my prep? Like I would just be like, right now, just like fried. But I still, like, I'm 3 days post show and I'm already like, okay, yeah, Worlds, yeah, I could have did better there. But hey, there's still some fire in me. Let's see what I can do in 2021. And I'll be 50. It's because I had fun through that prep, and I didn't take everything over the top serious, or I didn't try to be like super, super optimal all the time. So I kept my process as enjoyable as possible. So that's kind of my starting point to that question. Now I'm going to think about pizza again because I enjoy pizza.
Berto, please.
I've seen both eras, right? Because I also remember back when Like there wasn't a whole lot of good information out there. Like I remember, two folks right now that are like deep into the evidence-based side of just fitness, nutrition, all that. Talking about information that was dispensed to them from Sean Ray about how stretching your legs really helps bring out the separation in your quads, you know. And I remember both of them nodding, like, yeah, you know, I'm gonna give that a try. So like, it was. I go back to that, and I'm like, man, that wasn't necessarily better, I guess. But then I look at, I guess, how, especially with certain personalities, the evidence-based side of things just I think it does slow down their progress, right? Because they want to nail everything the first time, which you're not. But I almost feel like they're two different things. You know, it's like the wanting to get busy in the gym and lifting, and then the like nerding out. It's almost like they're two different hobbies, in my personal opinion. And you know, obviously you take into consideration what you've learned.
Yep.
And then also, you know, if there's things that you've just tried out that have worked well for you personally, that you know maybe you heard through the grapevine that it's worked for other bodybuilders as well. I think that's kind of what your training should be. It should be, you know, take into consideration all advice that seems reasonable. Like, don't be afraid to try new things. Like as we know, so quite often, like the evidence-based side of things just confirms a lot of things that like the bros have been saying for the longest time. The stuff that kind of makes sense anyways. So no, I think they can kind of both coexist, right? It's just I see them as two different things. Like when I'm nerding out on mass, it's like very different compared to like when I'm in the gym, in the trenches, and I'm trying to find I don't know, a better stance for like my squad personally, you know, and I'm playing around with those variables. So, no, I'm glad that things are the way they are, but yeah.
No, I agree. It's like two different things. Like you could be on the computer just like talking with people and nerding out on this stuff. Like you enjoy talking about it, conversing about it. I think the issue, like for us, it's not too much of an issue to separate those two things, because we're experienced. Whereas someone who's, let's say, green and they see this flood of information, that's where the issue is, because now they're like, how do I discern what should I be doing and not doing? So I think that's more of like maybe where this question is coming from. Would you say, Brad?
Yeah, and I can see where this person's coming from, because how many times do we see people come to us who want to do a consultation or they want coaching simply because they want to get back to what they love doing to begin with. They want to get back to just getting in the gym and getting stronger. They love that feeling, right? I mean, we all did. You know, when pretty soon the weights that were heavy are now light, that's what we kind of got. And now they're seeing, oh, well, now I'm reading that this is wrong and that's wrong and I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And then you're kind of like almost scared, you know, that.
Well, you're unsure. You're second guessing everything you're doing.
Exactly. You're second guessing. Is what I'm doing not going to work anymore? Could I have been moving any faster? And one of my more young clients said it best when he's like, you know, he says a lot of times, coach, he says, I come to you and the evidence-based community not to learn what I should do, but more so just to know what I shouldn't do. You know, take what the evidence says and say, okay, well, should I be doing that? What does the evidence say? No, I should not be doing that. You know, should I be doing that? What does the evidence say? No, I shouldn't be doing that. And that was a great point. It's like, yeah, you know, we should probably kind of look more so at this evidence-based stuff, not so much in that we need to do that. And to be optimal, we need to do that. We need to do this and this and this and this, but more so this new thing that's out there, you know, should I be doing that? What does the evidence say? Nah, I shouldn't be. Just go lift the weights, you know?
I think what would kind of ease a lot of people's minds if like I always try to preach big picture and like longevity standpoint. Like, I mean, look at natural bodybuilders. There's guys in their 40s and 50s still highly competitive. I'm winking a little bit, right? So if let's say you have a 20-year-old who just gets into it and you say, look, Johnny, you don't have to make all your gains by the time you're 25. You got until the age 50. Like if you have, ahead of time, like when you first start, you have a 30-year window to reach your full potential. That would probably ease a lot of people's insecurities or their desire to like get from point A to point B in a short amount of time frame, because that's basically what most people are after: fast gains and the most optimal gains. So that's where you're always looking for like this magic bullet, or you're buying into all these small details because you're trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. And don't get me wrong, I mean, so am I. I mean, yeah, I'd love to make as much progress as possible, but the reality is that you have a long, like most of us are going to have a long shelf life. And if we're going faster than we should be going, then you're setting yourself for either like physical burnout or even mental and emotional burnout, because you're a stress ball trying to get there. Like you're a 16-year-old kid trying to drive like a Dodge Charger with 500 horsepower. It's like the first time you get in the car, you got all this horsepower. You're like, I don't know how to drive. Mm-hmm. Wiping this car out. But hey, let me start you out with a Honda Civic. And then eventually you can upgrade to better cars down the road when you gain more driving experience. Mm-hmm. You'll be better off. So that's how I kind of look at it now, because it's easy for me. I can look in hindsight now, whereas when I started out at 14. There's no way I could even talk the way I'm talking right now. So that's kind of how I'm kind of like, I kind of look at that. It's like, if you're getting into this, you're just like, oh my gosh, it's a flood of information. Just start slow. Just set yourself a real easy structure, a little 4-day split, a couple of exercises or whatever, and roll with it and take notes. And then consume everything that's the information that's going on. But take it with a grain of salt that not everything you're hearing is like magic. Pizza is
realistically, I guess optimizing. I feel like it's the last. I feel sometimes people with, especially people who go deep into the bookworm side of things, they feel like they could almost crack the code to create something that they weren't destined to accomplish. Like, unfortunately, like so much of this is genetically predetermined. I'd say like 80% of like where you end up kind of revolves around that. Like we just came back from Worlds. Like if you talk to a lot of the like top guys backstage and like what they did, like a guy that did really, really well, actually, he was talking about how he doesn't squat at the end of his prep because he doesn't want his waist to thicken up. And like that's the last problem this dude has, right? So I feel that just the basic fundamentals in place and a lot of hard work will get you 80% of your results. And again, you can see it as like, oh, well, Bert's capping us here, right? It's like he's telling me I can never be, say, like a Jeff Alberts type bodybuilder or something like that. But I would honestly, if you enjoy this, like, who cares? Like, quit looking at that end result and just know that almost regardless of what you do, so long as you work really freaking hard and you have the basic things in place, you're going to get a lot of your results. Like there's chances that there's not one or two variables or secrets, muscle building secrets that you don't know about that are like hampering your progress that much. It took me 8 years to count calories, for example. But you know what I did do? I didn't miss a workout for 3 years at some point. I kept showing up. I kept working like really, really, really hard, and I was tenacious about it. And yeah. And that got me, I'd say to this day, still like 90% of my results come from that time frame where I didn't know so much.
Well, I just think about Jeff and all those years where he did everything by the book, or by what our books tell us today, suboptimal.
Yeah.
And look where he's at now, He was still in the gym. I mean, sure, he probably wasn't doing things quote unquote optimal, but he was still in the gym. He was still lifting the weights. Look where he's at today,
I still don't do things optimal.
But you're in the gym.
I'm in the gym more than I'm not in the gym, right? I'm pretty darn consistent. Yeah.
All right, you guys, we're going to move to a very serious subject now. Okay, one that's very important. It's called
Pizza?
Pooping. No, it's another keyword, pooping.
Okay.
We have an anonymous female from our CSQA forum. How do you deal with constipation when dieting? It happens to me with a higher protein intake and reduced calories every time I prep. So I'm going to kind of leave this to Berto, because Berto brought something up to me that I never even thought about, I think late in my 2009 prep when I was making my my pro debut. And he talked about gastrointestinal atrophy, that shrinking of your intestines. And I was like, well, duh. That's why I'm only pooping like every other day when normally I go out twice a day. So, Berto, you tend to elaborate on that?
You're dropping a lot of kids off. All right.
A lot of kids at the pool, yeah.
That's just, I've heard this one before, taking the Browns to the Super Bowl. I thought that was pretty good.
That's a good one.
That's my new favorite.
The Browns don't go to the Super Bowl, unfortunately.
No.
And that's kind of how, ooh, you're going to get some complaints on that one. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's just kind of the issue when most people prep. It's one of those things you kind of just expect to happen, right? I think for most people, that's just a symptom. There's definitely things you can do to make it a bit better. But to be quite honest, nothing's going to fix it the whole way outside of actually like stop dieting, start eating, and start regenerating that GI tract and eating like amounts of food that are actually going to challenge that thing. Yeah,
because there's less food, so high protein, less food. So assuming, okay, the food is coming down, this person's fiber intake is obviously probably coming down as well. So their fiber is probably really low. So
especially a female. Yeah, what do females eat? They eat nothing towards the end of their prep. Yeah. And just personally, I'd say that the female GI tract seems to be just a little bit more sensitive just in general compared to males, right? Like we usually have no problems pooping. Like we're pretty good about that, right? Like not during prep, but like during the off season, where it's like it always seems to be, especially with high protein diets in females, like we're always kind of working even in the off season around ways to kind of optimize our pooping schedule just a little bit. It's just funny sometimes. Like there'll be nosy people like at a cafe or an airplane, and they're like, "Holy crap, what are you looking at?" And I'm like, "It's my job, buddy." And they're like, "Oh, lucky man." And I'm like, "Nah, man. Like, most of this is like all we talk about is periods and poops, basically." So yeah, but yeah, no, there's things you can do, but it's just I guess you have to first of all confirm it with this person. Let them know that this is pretty normal. And something that we can make a little better, but it's never going to be all the way cured until after the prep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about females' gastrointestinal system just being a little bit more sensitive, Alberto, because it takes me back to when I coached my little sister, who's only 3 years younger than me, and we had this problem with constipation, and she wasn't even dieting at the time.
Yep.
I think she might have been just looking at, training and getting serious about her exercise regimen, stuff like that. And I know that me and myself and my bro days, I was taking up to 400 grams of protein at one point. Yes, I was one of those bros too. So you're looking at, what is that? 2.2 grams per, body weight, per pound of body weight, right? And I had no trouble, going to the bathroom. Now, there was other issues that were going on that are outside the context of this question. But my sister, on the other hand, I basically told her, in order to repair muscle, you need to eat muscle. So you need to have about 2 grams per pound of body weight, and she was only 130 pounds at the time. So, okay, 260 grams, no problem. She could not poop for days. And when she did, it hurt. She said that was very, very painful. So we had to find that sweet spot, for her. She couldn't go that high, and she couldn't really even go about 1 gram per pound of body weight. But, about 0.8, 0.9 grams per pound of body weight, that was kind of her sweet spot, where we were getting as much protein as we could get in. That was kind of, by the recommendations, but didn't stop her up and cause her, pain to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, I would think of this is a severe issue, or it's it's causing a lot of issues like pain and all that. And then My thought would be like, maybe you need to redistribute your macros, lower protein down, eat more fruits, vegetables, you know what I mean? Get a little more balance there, more moderation instead of having things so extreme. I mean, I know we're like, maybe the macros are set that way to get a desired outcome as far as from like quote unquote bodybuilding reasons, purposes. But to me, if it's affecting your quality of life, overall health, man, to me, it's like makes more sense to maybe see if you can redistribute the macros a little bit and get, make things a little more practical.
Mm-hmm. And we always got to look at all the variables too, right? Because we do know that water has a lot to do with.
Exactly. Make sure you're well hydrated. Yeah, for sure.
Your bowels and movement. So, maybe she doesn't say, what her water is there, but most of the time, our athletes are paying attention to their water intake, but not always. So that's something else that we have to kind of consider as well. But like Alberto said, when you're dieting, as long as your bowel movements aren't painful, you're going maybe every other day, your water intake is good, your protein's not ridiculously high. It's going to be kind of one of those things until you kind of get out of prep and start increasing your food, which sometimes alone that'll stimulate things to get moving when you.
Our eye behind the scenes also said like, refeeds. Refeeds will help too. Like obviously you got more food coming in. Like I know that helps me too. Whenever I have a good refeed or two, a good decent sized one. Oh yeah, that opens up the floodgates. And hey, maybe the Browns will go to the Super Bowl this year. So yeah, that definitely can help. See what food does? I'm a lot happier. I make more jokes. So yeah.
Oh, good one.
That's a recovery diet. Go to the website, check it out. Yeah, it works wonders after your season. Your spouse will love you for it.
All right, you guys, have we pooped out enough?
Yeah, I think we're good on the poop because generally, I think most bodybuilders they're having enough water. Most dieting bodybuilders they're having enough fiber typically, right? Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's just once you kind of just figure out what that pattern is, and like you might be every third day, some people like every fourth day and stuff, right? And I would really only worry if it exceeds like your if it goes somewhere else other than what you're used to. But if in doubt, hey, see a specialist, see someone. Luckily for us, like we live in a time where there's RDs who lift, and our boy Steve would be well equipped to handle that if you are kind of preoccupied with how little success the Browns are having during your contest prep. So
yeah, that's a good point. Actually, to be honest, I'll be very honest, I did track my bowel movements with this prep because in the past I've had issues with that. So like Roberto said, I could kind of see patterning. And yeah, it's almost like after every refeeds, like I said, our eye behind the cameras here, she was spot on with that. Like after refeeds, the Browns went to the Super Bowl.
Yay, Baker Mayfield. All right.
The Browns keep beating people over their head with their helmets, though. They ain't going to be even a team, much less go to the Super Bowl.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Cool.
All right, you guys. Question number 5. Sam, a 40-year-old male from our CSQA web forum. What are your guidelines for reducing volume as intensity is increased? For example, if I've been doing 5 sets of 12 at 60%, and I want to move to sets of 8 at 70%, what's an appropriate number of sets to get a similar training stimulus? Does it matter if I'm training for hypertrophy or for strength?
I think it does matter, like if it's like strength or hypertrophy. I think to be quite honest, if your goal is muscle growth, like you probably don't have to like schedule peak performance in any like specific intensity, to be quite honest. And kind of just hang in there and pound away and deload when you should, and you should see a trend upwards, like when it comes to your outputs. This is such an individual question because people, for example, with powerlifters, they taper very differently, kind of depending on the athlete. Like there's some people who I'll pull the volume away and I'll bring up the intensity, and we're like 9 days out from the meet. And then there's other people. It's like, hey, you know what? 5 weeks out, let's kind of start, transitioning a little bit into higher intensities and lowering the volume. And right, so I think that's kind of individual, and the best way to play around with it, well, I think this is where it gets fun. This is where you get to create some mock training cycles, and yeah, pick up, what trends you see, and I think that's half the fun. Like with myself and with my athletes, is to trying to as much as you can, anyways, like schedule peak performance if that is what you're into. And again, there's nothing wrong with bodybuilders that care about how much they lift. I know I do, but again, it's like I taper very differently compared to a lot of other bodybuilders I have that are like similar strength levels, body weights, and all that. So yeah, it's kind of individual, I feel. That's the art of coaching.
Yeah, don't you guys think because the question is around the volume question, and that it's like people always want to know ahead of time the answer, like how much volume or when to drop volume or when to increase volume. To me, it's like for me personally, it's more about, it's almost reactionary. Like I'd rather be reactionary versus trying to be like setting things up ahead of time, because I just don't know ahead of time. But if let's say I'm like, okay, I'm going to increase my intensity and keep the volume the same, do it. Okay, what's my response after? How did I recover? What does that feel like? Did I handle it well? Like, ask yourself questions like that after. Then okay, the next time, okay, I could either maintain it, or hey, I felt great doing it. I might even be able to do more, or shit, that beat me up so bad, I shouldn't do that again. So, but it's like this, from my experience, when people ask me these types of questions, it's almost like I have no clue until we actually do something, and then you get your response from it. So that's kind of like. Go ahead, Brett.
Well, I was just going to piggyback on what Berto said, because that's when it gets fun. Where you don't really necessarily worry about what volume is doing, and you get to like make your own training block. Like for this person here, what I would tell them is if you want to take your intensity up from 60% to 70%, don't worry about the sets. Don't worry about the volume. It's going to come down. It's going to have to. You're not going to be able to get as many repetitions with 70% as you did with 60%. And so volume is going to come down appropriately. And so the training stimulus, if anything, yeah.
But I can almost tell you, they're probably asking, should I, like when they're probably, I'm thinking anyways, I could be wrong, that they're thinking dropping volume down means dropping sets down. Not because you're saying, okay, you're going to go from 12 reps down to 8. Your volume naturally goes down because the reps go down.
Correct.
But I'm thinking this person's thinking, do I drop the sets down? That's what I'm kind of thinking.
The way that I interpret their question is they're actually thinking, how many sets should I add? If I'm dropping 2 sets of 8 at 70%, I need to add sets, right? And he wants to know, basically what's the number of sets to get, a similar training stimulus. So, I mean, to me,
there's another layer too. It's like, where's the reps in reserve? Like I can do 12. I could go to failure on both, and I can make the ladder feel just as hard, if not harder. So there's a lot of layers to the in context to this, I guess.
Yeah, and that's when it gets fun. Like if you just say you maintained, this person might say maintain their sets, maintain their RPE, take up the intensity, volume is going to drop appropriately, and the training stimulus is probably going to be maintained because your effort's the same, your sets are the same, training stimulus is probably going to be the same.
Yeah, so it's hard to quantify what's actually more or not more, more or less, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for this person, they should check out our pyramids, and then also perhaps run. I think TSA has a great program in regards to like helping you have peak out your strength on certain lifts. Their free intermediate program, I think, is, and I think that's probably the best way to start. It's like learn the principles so you can pick some sound generic programs, let those things take you, and very quickly after a few runs with them, obviously commit to them because they're not going to be perfect. You'll be kind of you'll be able to kind of figure out what worked for you, what didn't, what things you want to modify this next go around. But yeah, it's a little convoluted, but yeah, this one's
A lot of layers there, yeah.
yeah. There's just so many things that were left out, and I don't want to assume too much, but yeah, running generic programs. I think it's a sound generic programs is a great way to cut your teeth on something like this, and then eventually, figure out what works for you.
I think take notes as you go after each workout, like, okay, how like where your fatigue level is, like how your joints feel, you feel sore, not sore, how you felt the next day, et cetera, et cetera. And take notes too, like maybe keep track of your sleep, keep track of your nutrition, so you know that context around what you're feeling as well. So maybe it's not the training that's making you feel a certain way. Maybe it's just you're not sleeping well, maybe you're not eating enough, et cetera. So maybe you got life stress that's higher than other points in time. So taking notes is pretty valuable in your assessment of how things are going with your training and how to adjust.
And to expand on that, rolling back to our first question, take pictures. Because anecdotally, I don't know how many times you guys have done this, but I've oftentimes purposely raised up a person's intensity, knowing there's going to be a drop in volume. We get a new growth stimulus. Usually body weight stays about the same, or maybe a little bit of weight is gained, but they start looking a whole lot fuller. And we're kind of in the realm now where it's kind of like newbie gains, because heavier loads, a little bit less volume.
Yeah,
talk
recovering
about
better, etc.
Drop
Yeah.
down and we start getting a little bit of a new stimulus going there. All righty. Last question. 40-year-old male from our CSQA forum. Alejo, is that right, Alberto? The J silent there?
Yeah, Alejo. Yeah.
Okay. Is it okay to deload body parts independently as response to fatigue? Doing a whole body deload on a fixed schedule seems too much wasted time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And I'd love to go off.
I'll go last. This is your guys' specialty right here.
So here's something that I've seen happen in practice quite a bit. Someone has a poverty bench, right? We hurt something that doesn't let us squat and deadlift, right? And then all of a sudden that poverty bench takes up, even though we're roughly kind of doing the same, right? Which kind of goes to show you that it's like one whole system, right? So I feel rotating body parts that are this is like the deload week for your back, this is the deload week for your pecs. I think it's kind of oversimplifying just how complex like the human body is, and the fact that it all is like tied in together. So no, I think that's been going around circles, like in the evidence-based like side of things. But no, it's, you can't disconnect one thing from the other when it comes to training. Even though we like to see our especially as bodybuilders, we like to see our situation that way. But no, I would not recommend that. I've never used it myself on my athletes.
Yeah, and where do I start here? I mean, first of all, I have to kind of play devil's advocate and say, how do you know that that particular body part is fatigued? How do you know that that particular body part is accumulating fatigue? Unless you're just randomly deloading body parts in like a rotating system, I don't see how that would be effective in reducing overall fatigue. Because even though one area is being deloaded, you've got 7 other areas that are still accumulating fatigue. So you just have this round of the clock point when the whole system is never reducing fatigue. You're just always, the whole system is fatigued in some way, shape, or form, and you're just kind of moving it from one area to the other, and nothing is really ever getting accomplished.
Would it make more sense to deload exercises versus deloading body parts?
Which I have done body with.
If I'm gonna deload my arms this week. Well, now you're only talking like a little bit of curls and some tricep work. I mean, how demanding is that? Not very. But if you're squatting and deadlifting, you say, okay, I'm instead of squatting, I'm gonna do leg extensions. That's a significant reduction in demand.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's like maybe it's exercise. Like maybe use exercise versus. I wouldn't say versus. I'm not a versus guy. Like that's just one tool to use. Like would be to like look at exercise selection as a way of deloading. Because I can deload legs. Yeah, okay, that's bringing some demand down, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
and there's so much carryover. You know, it's how can you deload your squat but then continue to do leg extensions and leg curls and other movements like that? Because I know that like I have brought volume way down on a deadlift and have the person's deadlift actually progress because there's a lot of carryover from the squat to the deadlift, especially if they have a real good morning type of a squat, but in the particular context of what Alejo is asking here, again, getting back to Berto's point, when does the whole system deload? When does the whole system actually go through a total reduction?
Yeah.
It never does, because you're still always training the other body parts at all times. And
so
I
it
agree
sounds like
I would not advise.
It sounds like too, like the context of the question. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Brad. It seems like he's bored, like a deload's boring, so they're trying to get away with not deloading, in a way, in a sense.
Again, getting back to, he's worried about wasted time. That's what he says. Fixed schedule seems too much wasted time.
Okay, so
during those deloads,
assuming, let's say, this person's not in a deficit or whatever, then maybe he doesn't need to deload as frequently. Maybe he can push out another week or 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. So that might be something to maybe experiment with. Like, let me stretch out this block of training another week, and let's see if I'm okay to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Before you deload. Like it's great to deload, like preventative maintenance, like stay ahead of the curve so you don't, get all these aches and pains and things like that. But sometimes like a way to generate more volume is like, let me just train normally another week. Especially if you're in a surplus and things like that, like you could probably get away with doing it. So that would be my thought, would be like, if you're bored, you feel like, hey, I feel like I'm wasting time, chances are this person doesn't feel like they need a deload at that particular point in time. So you might have to do some trial and error.
And to be honest with you, I have, especially female athletes that are not necessarily, prepping, I have them auto-regulate their deloads with their menstrual cycle. Because how many females have you guys worked with where like the pre-menstrual week, they feel terrible.
Yeah.
Their performance is bad. They feel weak, I'll say, you know what? Deload that week. Do one set of everything, There's nothing wrong with that. And then likewise, there's nothing wrong with, I never let somebody go as long as, say, 8 weeks without a deload. But I do play with it a lot of times between like as little as every 3rd week to every 6th week,
Yeah, because just the way that the way the question's asked, it just almost seems like this person is not needing a deload. And they're like, okay, how can I get away with deload? Like, I know I should be deloading because everybody says I should be deloading, but how can I do like the least deload possible? So I'm assuming that this person doesn't even need a deload at that particular time. Like I would experiment with adding another week or 2 of training before deloading.
And a lot of times, especially with my general population clients, we're going to deload at some point. At some point, there's going to be a vacation, and you're just going to have to just do a hotel workout once while you're there. There's a deload, or life gets in the way. I had business trips and business meetings to do for a whole week, and I only got 2 training sessions in. Well, there's a deload, I got sick and I couldn't train. There's a deload. There's going to be some point where you're going to deload just because life is going to dictate it, And so there's nothing wrong with just letting life dictate deloads. Just try not to stretch out a really long block where, your performance and your strength starts to decline, because now you're in need of a deload. You never really want to get to that point. Berto, you're chomping at the bit there.
No, I agree. If you think like deloads are a waste of time, like getting hurt's even more of a waste of time. And at the end, that honestly is what has the biggest impact in most people who train hard throughout their lifting career. That's probably the thing that sets people back the most, is getting banged up. So respect the deload. Take them.
Gentlemen, we have answered all of our questions that were so
right.
that were so thoughtfully put into our programming. Do we have any other things that we want to comment on? I know Jeff is dreaming about pizza. Maybe we should let him go and partake.
I don't think I'm gonna have pizza after all. I think I'm gonna have my chicken cabbage salad with yogurt blue cheese dressing and 2 pita breads, so I can get shredded again for next week. The cabbage will help me help the Browns go to the Super Bowl, probably. I'm gonna be a Browns fan, I think. Now that we're talking about the Browns so much.
That's a dead end. But
well, I mean,
I shouldn't say that.
Look how many years I was a Raider fan and it was a dead end.
Hey, Raiders are on the upswing.
They're actually winning. Yeah, they're actually winning. So
he's back. Yeah.
So I think, now I can watch a football game with pizza, and I don't have to worry about prep anymore. That's such a good feeling now. I feel very accomplished now.
Glad to hear it, Jeffrey. Glad to hear it. All right, gentlemen. Thank you for the conversation. It was very good.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you guys. Yeah, we did good, and I hope that helped those people who had the questions and those tuning in as well. So.
All right. Until next time.
Go Browns.
Hey there, this is Coach Eric Helms. Thanks so much for listening to our show. 3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate just a couple dollars per month to our cause to help educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you discount codes for future use on any of our paid products. But any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team by going to patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you in the next show.